Hello and welcome along to today's webinar, Reimagining the Visitor Experience, New Audiences, New Opportunities. And I'm delighted to say we have two wonderful guests with us today. We have James Rodliff from ATS Heritage and James is Operations Manager at Stonehenge. And we're also joined by Anne Fletcher, renowned interpretation and visitor experience consultant. So we're very happy to have you both with us. Thank you. But as is tradition, before we begin today, we thought we'd invite each of you to take part in a short poll, our first of two polls today, just to take the temperature in the room. So if you could all kindly look at your screens as we ask the first of today's questions. So, do you feel that your organisation is prepared for the changes they need to make to the on-site visitor experience? Okay, so it is 60% say yes and 40% say no. So, okay, so reasonably confident. Okay, so James, if we could begin with you first of all, please. Just describe for us how things are at Stonehenge today as compared to before the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, John. The most obvious difference is it's a bit quieter. We would be seeing our record numbers this time of year, and because of both the safety cap that we've put in place and also because the demographics that we'd normally be welcoming this time of year, you know, largely international audience, we are quieter. It doesn't mean to say there's not an awful lot to do still, because the work that goes into welcoming the visitors that are coming is more, actually. You know, there's more to do to look after them, to keep them safe, and to maintain that level of amazing experience that people should be getting from us. It looks different from the moment you arrive. You know, there's new signage in place to welcome people back to us and to remind them of ways that they can behave to stay safe themselves, and also to help us to look after our colleagues and our other visitors as well. For us, it being a largely international audience means that our whole approach to, you know, the audience that we're looking at is different. You know, we have a much more young family demographic coming in now, which is amazing, and they're coming and they're acting in different ways as well. So they're staying for longer, and they're here to explore and have an adventure and have a real day out. Which is quite different to other audiences that maybe are trying to see several attractions in a day. Will stop by, have a selfie, grab a pasty, and off they go again. So that means that there's a different feel to the site, and it's really quite lovely. And we're seeing some local people that have never been coming in, which is lovely. And we're seeing people who are really making the most of a kind of staycation, seeing what the UK has to offer. And overall, it feels really positive. It feels really good. And, you know, there was some nerves from our staff, and from visitors, I think, at first, and, you know, as they're first coming out. But overall, it feels really nice. It genuinely feels really good.
That's encouraging to hear. Brilliant. And we're talking about visitor experience today. I mean, that term means so many different things. So just for context, tell us what you understand by the phrase visitor experience.
Okay, well, obviously everyone will have a different view on this, but what James has just given is a really, really good example, I think, of the context that you look at visitor experience, and all of us look at visitor experience within. And it's all about what its aim is. And handily, there's a nice little acronym, AIM, which helps you think about it. So audience, absolutely critical. And I guess the reason why many of us are here today is to look at how those audiences are changing in the current climate, as James just mentioned. But absolutely crucial. Without knowing who your audience is, what's the point? The next point is infrastructure, really. What do you have to put in place to support that visitor experience? Cafes, roads, signage, but particularly at the moment to make people feel safe. And James has been talking about that. But I think another really important factor is money. Is how do you pay for all of this? And does your organisation need you to generate money specifically from the visitor experience? And is that more of a requirement now than perhaps it has been in the past? So I think those are the sort of areas that it would be nice to think about together.
Absolutely, and we'll cover some of that ground, I'm sure, today. Also, don't forget, we do welcome your questions. So if at any point today the conversation leads you to have a thought or a question, you can submit it. There is a Q&A box at the bottom. So, James, this idea of reimagining visitor experience is something that a lot of us, I think, have gone through in recent months, and it has been a challenge. But as a visitor, what are some of the, I guess, the main changes that we would see at Stonehenge today?
I think one of the first things is noticing that it is quieter, and that is actually quite a real draw for people. A lot of people don't necessarily like being swept along in a busy wave of people. So actually, it being quieter, especially now, of course, that draw to open spaces and spreading out is really important. But we started right from scratch. So when we first started planning out, we thought about every single step of the journey, every single one, and how that would feel for a visitor. And don't take anything for granted. Really try and, it's a bit of an old adage, but put yourself in the shoes of a visitor. And that's everything, from pre-arrival all the way through to coming, the first messages they're receiving, that intent that you're going to look after them by. And the phrase sanitizing your attraction rather than your experience has been bandied around a little bit recently, but it is absolutely spot on. We just didn't want to take away from any of the good stuff that we had, or if we absolutely had to, is there anything we could do to replace it? So there were some small things. So for example, we went through every stage of a journey and looked at every surface you might need to touch, and could we not touch that surface? These small things. We put little levers in our bins to keep the bins open, remove a touch point. Just, again, it's a bit reassuring for people so they don't have to come in contact with that. But one of our bigger changes was we worked really closely with the National Trust, especially around Stonehenge and Avebury. And in Stonehenge landscape, we worked with them to put in a great new walking route. So you explore the landscape more, which has been quite a big change to how you'd normally experience Stonehenge. That with extra trails and ways to have fun and explore has been, I suppose, the kind of biggest change. The other bits, there are inevitably parts of the site that we can't get access to, or we can't experience in the same way. So then we thought, okay, is there a way then you can, what's the next best thing almost to that? So we have our replica Neolithic houses on site, beautiful constructed volunteer projects, and the volunteers are deeply passionate about them. They're normally inside, fire going, replicas out. It's incredible, really atmospheric experience. We can't get people into the houses, it's just too small and not safe. So we took the volunteers and the replicas outside of the houses. It's the summer at the moment, of course, which is good. And they've been doing talks outside, and it's been incredible, and people have really enjoyed it. And they've actually, more people have approached them because it's more approachable than being outside, which is really, really nice. So that's been a real success. And then obviously you are still missing an element, but you can't see inside the houses. So our amazing learning education team have come up with some new interpretation where you can scan a QR code and you can see what's happening inside the house. Okay, so you don't get the full experience inside, but all these steps help mitigate the fact that, we've put a safety measure in and had to step back a little bit from that. So that and a lot of cleaning, very, very visible cleaning throughout the site, that reassurance as well.
Busy time. And we're hearing a lot about how audiences are changing, but I suppose the challenge is, how do we measure that? And then how do we address these new audiences?
So it's hard to measure when they're not here, of course, isn't it? So even if you've got the budget for an enormous market research campaign, they're not there to ask. So I think it's time for collaboration. It's a crisis, and I think people need to talk to each other. I think there's a lot of information you can learn from for other sites around you, from local museums, libraries when they open, from smaller houses, from parks, from tourist authorities, anybody you can think of who will have some information about who's in the area, who's doing what. And I think once you begin to think, James has said, we know the overseas visitors aren't here this year. Domestic audiences are really important, the family audience more than ever. And if it's too big a leap to get inside the head of a kid or a 20 or 30-year-old, as it probably is for me, form a group, invite students to come. There's teenagers around with nothing to do, desperate for something to do. It's good experience if you want to work in heritage. If you're doing a history or history of art course, maybe you can invite them along to be on a panel a couple, every so often, and talk to them about, get ideas, use this as a time. I think it is an opportunity to try and rethink what we can do and to experiment with some things that needn't cost the earth. But I think it's about talking to people and getting as much information as you can about who might come and what they might want.
Excellent, thank you, Anne. And James, we have had a question as well for you, which we'll bring in at this point. Lizzie asks, I'm interested to know the impact of COVID. At what capacity is Stonehenge operating compared to last year?
We've adjusted it actually, so it's around. It was about a fifth of what we were operating at. It's around about a 25% now. That sounds more drastic than it is in a way because we've changed our opening hours as well. So normally in the summer we've open from 9 in the morning to late at night. We've taken the decision not to do that this year. We open on our core hours of 9 to 5. So that change in visitor number is also reflected in that. Although outside of that, which I'll speak about at some point today, probably we've been looking at experiences outside of those hours. So we have got some extra visitors coming outside of the normal hours, exploring the site in different ways, which has been really exciting.
Cool. And James, just in with you for a moment. So whenever you and your English Heritage colleagues regrouped, tell me, where did you look for inspiration?
A really good question. I'm very lucky to have an amazing band of colleagues, and we, from all different parts of the organisation got together and almost from when the note came down saying the sites have got to close, we started talking about reopening. And English Heritage is a big organisation. This is over 400 sites that we look after across the country. And so, communication was really, really key in how we communicate with each other efficiently, but also with our visitors and our members. So that kind of cohesive approach to letting people know what was going to be opening and when was going to be really important. But in the initial stages of when we did it, it was initially there was webinars such as these resources like today, which were invaluable to see what everyone else was doing. At first, it was totally unknown. We had no idea how long lockdown was going to last and what the world was going to look like afterwards. Webinars, an organisation such as Alva, the Visitor Experience Forum, were producing really, really good content. I know we all were having discussions with other sector colleagues as well, sometimes with a glass of wine, and just kind of batting through ideas and seeing, how are we going to get through these challenges. We looked at it within the sector, organisations like the National Trust who were able to open landscapes earlier, and seeing how that was going. I visited Chatsworth on my day off amongst a few other attractions, amazing Chatsworth, and could see how they were approaching problems. We were looking at what people were doing. Anne mentioned that obviously money is always important and budget. We looked around at how people were able to create content. So, for example, Painshill Park created a video on a phone. Their welcome back to Painshill was done on a phone, and it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant, exactly what you needed, and perfect. We also looked outside heritage. So for us, we at Stonehenge particularly, we've got a big shop. We've got big bathrooms. We've got buses. We've got all these things. So I was looking at, we were talking about supermarket best practice from supermarkets, from service stations. How were they able to, facilitate the mass movement of people, to feed them and use the bathrooms and this kind of stuff? How were buses in the high street operating, and how were they coping? And so all of these kind of fed into our overall plan. And it was tricky because it was a lot of information. It was changing very often as well. So to keep on top of that was hard going. But whilst we were doing all that, we were also talking to our membership base, our visitors, and producing a lot of online content as well. So we launched our TikTok. We were using all of our platforms to keep in contact with visitors and try and understand what they wanted from us and try and stay true to our mission statement as well.
Interesting. Yeah, you've been so busy, but it's great to see that spirit of collaboration as well. And we have another question that's just come in for you. Some great questions. Do keep them coming, please. And Amanda asks, I'm interested in your thoughts about whether these new audience trends will be here to stay, or in time will ever return to a pre-COVID model.
Crikey, that's a big question, isn't it? Well, I think James has summarised really well. This is a constantly moving thing, isn't it? We're all trying to find out at the same time. We're all talking to each other and trying to see what we think. We know that the overseas visitors aren't here. So for Central London attractions, this is a big crisis this year. Some of the big country houses, it's a big crisis this year. I personally think the key is not to turn your back on everything that you've developed in the past. You know, that audience will return. So throwing the baby out with the bathwater, I don't think is a very sensible approach. I think this is about trying to be as diverse as you can with the resources that you've got. So to try and provide extra things, to try and attract in people that you know are looking for things to do. We've talked about families, we've talked about young adults who are probably more likely to want to be out and about at the moment. So make an effort to try and do something for them, whether that, but then it's opportunity. Maybe you're building that audience then permanently for the future, which would be a wonderful thing. But it would be nice to think that the traditional audiences will be back at some point too. So I think it's about flexibility. It's about being as diverse and as varied as you can with the resources that you've got. And I think James touched on a few of those things, you know, using online quite cheaply, using visitors' own phones to put content on, looking at, if you've got to develop a route around your site, make them themed routes if you can. You know, if you've got to develop a booking system because that's how you've got to let people in, then think about booking other things in. As James was saying, you know, why couldn't you do a small group after hours that you could socially distance with a curator, or open a special room that's never been opened before? So I think it's trying to think of ways to get within the restrictions that we have at the moment. Getting people on site is thinking of imaginative ways to, by flexing our hours and our spaces, to try and get the people in that we know do want to come in.
Excellent. And James, goodness knows this has been anything but smooth sailing. We hear difficult stories every day at the moment. Is there anything that you found through this process especially challenging, and how did you overcome it?
So we both touched upon it there, that the information, trying to stay up to date all the time was tricky, and then trying to take that information, translate it into what it means for you as an organisation, and writing risk assessments, and then you almost finish that first one, then there's a change. You know, it's been like that for everyone. It's been tough, and trying to keep those risk assessments in one hand, and for us, our amazing visitor experience strategy in the other hand, and trying to meld them together. And so not compromising where possible our interpretation, our stories that we're trying to tell, and you know, losing it in a bucket of hand sanitizer. You know, really just trying to stay true to what we're trying to do. We won an award for accessibility at the end of last year, which was amazing. We were really chuffed to bits because the team are really keen on, you know, ensuring that we are open and welcoming to everyone. And some of the measures that we could have put in place would have actually gone against that. And that was, you know, sometimes the cheaper and easier ones made us less accessible. And that was a really difficult one, trying to find the right balance there and not compromise where possible on the accessibility. You know, for us, an outdoor site, you know, we couldn't just tarmac a bunch of new paths around everywhere to create social distancing. So that was definitely a challenge. One of the other quirks about Stonehenge is that our visitor centre is 2.5 kilometres away from our attraction. So normally the majority of people would get a bus from one side to the other. Well, the last thing people really wanted to do was cram onto buses like it's rush hour in London. So we had to look at social distancing on our buses, and then with our incoming visitors, can we afford the number of buses that we wanted? Are there other ways of doing this, which is part of the reason why we partnered with the National Trust and came up with this lovely route across the landscape, and actually made the experience arguably better than it was before. But then keeping elements like the buses to ensure that we remain as accessible as we can be to everyone as well. So that was tough. But in having these conversations, in looking at our opening hours and thinking about, you know, what's the best, most efficient and effective and cost-effective way for us to run, is part of the way we came around to realise that actually our out-of-hours offer was something that we could build on. So our amazing Stone Circle experiences, where you can come and you can get inside Stonehenge, it's amazing.
Wow.
It's so cool, and people are blown away by it. And they're so popular, although we run them all the time anyway. There's a window between closing and when it gets dark that you can do that. But obviously that window's grown a little bit. But also where we would normally have quite a lot of international markets taking those special experiences up, and not too many UK markets, we've been able to go out to people in the UK and say, you're looking to do something special, this is really special. And they've come and they have adored it. And the feedback has been absolutely wonderful. And people saying, oh, I've driven past it all this time, I've never really stopped by and had a look. And there they are inside Stonehenge. And it's been, yeah, really, really nice.
It's great. And there's been so much creativity in this period. I think that's been a real positive. And just staying on that topic, what are some of the quick wins in visitor experience that people watching can put in place today?
I think I may have already listed quite a few. I think I've sort of, because I think it's about thinking about how you can take the content, how you can take the interpretation, the things you've already got, and present them in ways that allow them to work with the COVID restrictions. So I think it is thinking about where you can use technology if you can't use human beings, where you can, as we talked about, flexing hours, and James has just given that brilliant example about after hours stuff. Of course, it's that, can you get families in early so that that older visitors aren't getting upset and vice versa. And thinking about activating content that you already have in panels, QR codes. I think James mentioned that, which is a really good English heritage example. The themed routes, which a number of people are doing, saying rather than let's just not think of it as a route to manage social distancing, let's try and make it more interesting. So I think it is just trying to be very creative with the restrictions that we've got, and trying to see it as an opportunity to test something new that we might want to keep long term.
Indeed. And Dirk asks, he says there will undoubtedly be a more important role to be played by online interpretation, and it's a difficult balance. So potentially conflict, between online versus on-site content. And I suppose that brings us to the bigger question: what role really can technology play in visitor experience?
I think there's always been a discussion, hasn't there, about it's all about the experience you want your visitors to have on site. And for every visitor group, that experience will be different, and what people want will be different. And I think there's always a tendency to think younger people want technology, older people don't want technology. And I think it's getting away from that and sort of testing things out. I think at the moment there's opportunities with it to provide content that you can't do in other ways, but I think it needs to be thought out as part of a broader strategy. And I think the important thing is to get everything online at the start that you want people to see before they visit. The safety videos, the wonderful things that people are doing to say, don't worry, you'll be fine. And then to look at how you can probably using visitors' own devices. It's the cheapest, most effective way of doing that. And testing things out, but to think beyond opening and to think long term what the experience is going to be. And as I said before, not just change everything drastically, but there's an opportunity with technology certainly now that perhaps wasn't there before to solve some of these issues.
Okay, well that leads us neatly to our second poll today, which I'll just launch. So it's on your screens. As your audience profile evolves, will technology play a more central role in your visitor experience? Okay, let's have a look at the results. So 88%, say that technology will play a more central part in their visitor experience going forward. So things are changing. James, what would your advice be today to any organisations that are about to reopen their doors to the public again?
Firstly, I'd say, you're not alone. These kind of discussions, are so important, and there are so many different ways you can have them. We're in the most amazing sector. We are hands down, obviously, but full of amazing creative people with amazing solutions to issues. And we're all in the same position. And what's good for one of us is generally good for all of us. We need to work together to bring our sector back online. So take advantage of those discussions. First of all, there's lots of good people out there producing amazing content. And also, secondly, a lot of places have gone through this process already. Speak to them, learn from them, learn from their successes, and take the essence of that and see what it would mean for you and your organisation. And they might be able to help avoid any pitfalls as well. And don't forget, you've got experts in your own teams as well. Our staff and volunteers often are at the front line of our visitor experience. They're the ones that see how visitors react, how they behave, and the things they like and dislike. So utilise them, make them part of the process as much as possible. They will be able to help guide you, and they'll feel so much better for it. it can be a nervous time for frontline staff and volunteers. It's not easy when they're at the sharp end, essentially. So making them part of the process empowers them to help the organisation make decisions that are going to work for them as well. And lastly, just don't be afraid to test and then change things. You don't have to come up with a perfect plan on the first go. That's fine. So we did a few things. We did family and friends test days at our sites, which were really useful. So we opened a couple of our sites before Stonehenge, and we opened the amazing Old Sarum just outside Salisbury beforehand. So I went along to that family and friends day. Then I was there on their opening day, and just seeing the different kind of feedback you get from people. And our family and friends day was really useful at Stonehenge as well. It gave us really good feedback. And then we did briefings. So I'd gather the team around at the end of the day on the first few days that we were open, saying, right, what was amazing today? What worked really well? What could we do better tomorrow? And we changed. That's absolutely fine. And with using online, using your website, these things can be changed quickly. So yeah, that's probably the three I'd say from me.
Excellent. And we know reopening is really just part of the story. And it's taken a lot for some organizations just to get that far.
Yeah.
What happens from there?
Well, I think as James said, the good thing is if we could try and see this as an opportunity, it's a chance to be, it's a very collaborative industry. There's always been a lot of sharing amongst people and within organisations, and I think it's a chance to really to do that now and be super creative and try and get us through this very difficult time. And I think the thing to be aware of is that that's going to have difficulties for some people, and for some volunteers, staff members. It may be that decisions are made that not everybody agrees with. It may be that people are having to bring in a visitor experience for a time that not everyone's comfortable with. There's going to be changes, and I think it's really important just to keep talking and keep involving people, as James said, involve everyone in the team to understand why things are having to happen. And I think the National Trust is a good example of that at the moment. Big changes bring big reactions, and it's a time of big change. So I think collaboration, talking, communication, really, really important.
Absolutely. Well, folks, we're nearly out of time. I can't believe it's gone so quickly today. Thank you to our wonderful guests, to Anne Fletcher, to James Rodliff, and to all of you for your questions today as well. There will be a follow-up email with all the information that we've discussed today and some helpful links. And to those of you who will be virtually attending Connecting Culture and Museum Next Disrupt, we'll see you there. Be sure to be in touch with any questions. And as ever, if we can help with audio guides, multimedia guides, or video production, do feel free to get in touch. And very finally, we thought we'd share a little animation that we've put together, and it just gives a bit more of an insight into what we do at ATS and how we can potentially help in the future. So many thanks again for joining us. We'll leave you with this video, and we will see you again soon. Thanks for joining us.
So, you run a museum, a gallery, a castle, an important building, an open-air site, or some other distinctive visitor attraction. Now, understandably, you and your curator are very, very proud of your site. But you are not getting enough visitors. You have challenges engaging with younger people and older people, and the visitors you have are confused about where to go. You do not have enough room to display all of your collection. So what can you do? Well, here's an idea. What about a multimedia guide from ATS Heritage? It can deliver really creative interpretation which can improve your visitors' experience, allowing them to connect as never before with presenter-led tours, expert interviews, interactives to make more sense of the collection, augmented reality to bring your exhibits to life, awesome tours for younger visitors and older visitors to entertain, educate and enhance their understanding of your site. And with an app version of the multimedia guide, their experience continues even when they have left. And like all things these days, they can share, meaning that you have happier and more engaged visitors and staff. And here's the big bonus. The easy-to-use content management system from ATS Heritage allows you to refresh the content on both the multimedia guide and its app version. and reduces the need for all of those paper leaflets and handouts. Contact ATS Heritage today to make sure your interpretation is not prehistoric.